They passed me the plate like I was the help. Not a word, not a glance, just the coldest dish slid across the long oak table, as though I hadn't cooked for them 1,000 nights before, as though I was no more than the maid who should be grateful to eat last. I didn't reach for it. I let the plate sit there, the steam already fading into the air, the meat toughening by the second. Their voices carried around me, laughing too loudly, pretending nothing was wrong. But I caught the side eyes, the half smiles, the way my sister-in-law leaned in close to whisper something that made the others chuckle. They thought I wouldn't notice. At 68 years old, after a lifetime of swallowing their insults, they still underestimated me. Don't miss this story. If you've ever given everything and been left empty, this one will hit deep. Watch through to the end. The silence cuts sharper than words. What they didn't see was the folded weight in my purse, resting heavy against my hip like a weapon. I had been keeping track for years. Every dollar, every hour, every sacrifice carved out of my life for theirs. Tonight I didn't come empty-handed. Tonight they were going to choke on the truth. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner, just past 6:30, its pendulum swinging like a heartbeat. The smell of roasted chicken and overdone carrots filled the air, mixed with the faint sourness of cheap wine. The yellow light above the table buzzed with a soft flicker, casting their faces in uneven shadows. I could see the lines of age on my brother's forehead, the lipstick too bright on my niece, the hunger in their eyes that had nothing to do with food. "Mom, aren't you going to eat?" my son asked, though his voice was flat, rehearsed. He didn't look at me when he said it, just shoveled potatoes onto his own plate. "I'm not hungry," I answered calmly. My fork stayed still. My hands folded in my lap. They wanted me small, quiet, obedient. Tonight I'd give them silence, but not the kind they expected. The chair beside me creaked as my daughter-in-law leaned closer. "You really should try the chicken," she said sweetly, but her eyes flicked toward my untouched plate like I'd broken a rule. "We made it special." I almost laughed. I could still remember the night I pawned my mother's gold bracelet to buy groceries for her and my son when they couldn't afford diapers. No one called that special. I glanced around the table. My brother was already reaching for a second helping, his hand brushing against the stack of unopened bills tucked into his jacket pocket. I knew about those bills. I'd paid off enough of them in the past to recognize the way his eyes darted, the way his wife pressed her lips together like a cork in a bottle. They thought I was blind. But I had seen everything. I lifted my glass, swirling the watered-down wine. The liquid caught the light, dull and lifeless. "It's funny," I said quietly, "how quickly people forget who kept the lights on." The chatter stumbled, then picked back up, forced and brittle. My niece giggled, too high-pitched. My brother cleared his throat. "They didn't want me steering the conversation, not tonight." I set the glass down slowly. My fingers brushed the edge of my purse where the papers rested, sharp as knives. For months I'd rehearsed this moment, how I would sit in this very seat, let them show their true faces and then peel away the mask. But patience was part of the punishment. I wanted them to squirm first. The chicken cooled. The candles guttered low. I watched my family eat, their forks clinking like tiny hammers in a coffin. I thought about all the other dinners years ago when I was the one cooking, cleaning, serving, smiling through the exhaustion because that was what they expected. They never once passed me the plate first. Not once. My brother raised his glass. "To family," he said, his voice heavy with that false cheer he always used when he wanted something. They all echoed, "To family," and clinked glasses. I lifted mine but didn't drink. "To family," I repeated softly, and my words tasted like ash. The clock chimed 7. A long, heavy sound that made the room still for just a breath. My heart didn't race, it steadied. I'd waited too long for nerves. "Is something wrong?" my son asked, finally noticing the way I hadn't touched the food, the way I was staring at each of them like strangers. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "No," I said, "nothing's wrong at all. In fact, I've been waiting for this dinner." His brow furrowed. "Waiting?" I tapped the purse at my side. Just enough to make their eyes follow. My brother's fork froze midair. My niece shifted in her chair. My daughter-in-law bit her lip. "Yes," I said calmly, almost cheerfully. "I brought something tonight." The room seemed to inhale. The hum of the light grew louder, the tick of the clock sharper. Outside, a car door slammed, then faded into the distance, leaving only the pulse of silence around the table. My sister-in-law forced a laugh. Oh, come on, it's just dinner. You don't need to. But I was already unzipping the purse. Fully. Deliberately. The sound cut through the air like a blade being drawn. I didn't pull anything out yet. Just left the purse open wide enough for them to see the thick folds of paper, the glint of something they didn't understand. My son swallowed hard. Mom, what is that? I looked at him, steady, unblinking. Evidence, I said. A silence fell that even the clock seemed afraid to break. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, my eyes sweeping across each face. The smirk was gone from my niece's lips. The false brightness had drained from my brother's eyes. Even my daughter-in-law's hands trembled as she set down her fork. For once they weren't in control. I reached out, nudged the untouched plate away, and folded my hands on the bare wood of the table. My voice was quiet, but each word landed heavy. You've mistaken me for the help, I said. But tonight you're going to learn exactly who I am. And then I stopped, letting the weight of it hang in the air. Their eyes darted to my purse again. No one spoke. The only sound was the scrape of a chair as my niece shifted, too restless to hide her nerves. My hands didn't tremble when I reached inside. I had rehearsed this moment too many times for nerves. I pulled out the first bundle, folded papers held together with a worn elastic band. It snapped as I dropped them onto the table. The stack hit with a flat, heavy slap, scattering a few slips across the white cloth. The room changed then. The air thickened, the laughter vanished, and every fork stilled. These, I said, my voice steady, are the pieces of my life I spent on each of you. One by one I spread them out. Grocery store receipts, credit card statements, handwritten notes from years back. The paper smelled faintly of ink and dust, worn soft from being handled too many times. They fluttered in the candlelight, edges curling like old leaves. My brother leaned forward, squinting. What is this supposed to be? His voice tried for authority, but it wavered. I tapped one with my finger. $360 for your electricity. Remember that? The month you swore you'd pay me back before Christmas? That was 2009. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I slid another toward my daughter-in-law. $900 for your car tires. I remember the way you cried, said you couldn't drive to work without them. You hugged me and called me your second mother. Do you remember that? Her face flushed crimson. She looked down, picking at the edge of her napkin. I spread more across the table, faster now. $7,000 for hospital bills. $1,200 for rent when the landlord threatened to throw you out. $500 for your little girl's birthday party because you didn't want her to be embarrassed in front of her classmates. The numbers piled higher and higher, until the table was littered with them, like ash settling after a fire. No one reached for food anymore. Even the chicken sat abandoned, steam long gone, gravy hardening. My niece broke the silence. We didn't ask you to keep all this. I looked at her sharply. No. You didn't ask. You expected. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. I leaned back in my chair, letting them stare at the mess I had made across their perfect dinner table. My chest rose slow, calm. This wasn't rage. This was reckoning. For years I had watched them devour what I offered, never stopping to think about the cost. Tonight the cost was staring them in the face and they didn't know where to look. My son finally spoke, quieter than the others. Mom, why now? The question sank deep. My own child sitting across from me with his fork untouched, his eyes darting like a boy caught doing wrong. I folded my hands. Because you planned this dinner to stop me from leaving. To stop me from living my life after giving it away piece by piece. I thought it was time you saw the bill. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He didn't argue, not yet. My brother's wife tried instead. Families help each other, she said, her voice too sharp, too fast. That's what families do. You shouldn't hold this over us. I picked up one of the slips, smoothed it flat with my palm. The ink was faded, but the numbers were still clear. I don't hold it over you. I kept it to remind myself. Because every time I thought of saying no, I remembered how quickly you all forgot the last yes. The clock ticked louder, as though it wanted to join the conversation. I pushed another bundle forward, this one thicker, heavier. It slid across the cloth and stopped in front of my brother. That's all yours. Every cent I spent cleaning up your mistakes. Do you want me to read them out loud? His jaw clenched. He didn't touch it. I turned to my daughter-in-law. And this stack is yours. The one that kept your house from foreclosure when your husband lost his job. Do you remember who signed those checks? She blinked fast, her lashes wet. My niece tried to speak again. But I cut her off. Don't you dare. I paid for your school supplies, your trips, even that prom dress you bragged about on Facebook. You smiled in those pictures, never once mentioning the hand that made it possible. Her eyes dropped to her lap. The receipts lay scattered now, covering half the table. The flicker of the candles made them shimmer like a battlefield, every slip a wound, every number a scar. I could feel their unease. They shifted in their chairs, cleared their throats, avoided my eyes. The weight of paper was heavier than stone. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I leaned forward again, my voice low, steady. Do you see it now? This isn't charity. This is sacrifice. Every receipt is a piece of me you took and never gave back. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, suffocating. I let them sit in it. Let them squirm. My son rubbed his temple as though a headache had bloomed. My daughter-in-law's eyes darted toward the door as if escape was possible. My brother sat stone still, his fists clenched. I reached for one last slip, folded tight, the ink darker than the rest. I didn't lay it down. I just held it between two fingers, letting them see but not touch. This one, I said quietly, is the most expensive of all. Do you want to know what it cost me? Their heads turned, eyes wide. I smiled, calm, steady, unshaken. Not yet. The candle flickered, sputtered, then steadied again, casting long shadows across the paper battlefield. And I let the silence stretch, holding the secret just out of reach. But silence is a living thing. It crawled over them, pressed down on their shoulders, stole the air from their lungs. I watched their eyes dart to one another, each of them silently begging someone else to speak first. No one did. So I reached into the purse again. This time it wasn't paper slips that rustled, but stiff pages heavy with years. The sound was different, slower, more deliberate. I pulled out the worn leather calendar, its corners frayed, the spine cracked from too much opening and closing. I set it down in the center of the table. The dull thud of it landing made my daughter-in-law flinch. This, I said softly, is the record of everything you cost me that couldn't be paid back in money. Their eyes stayed fixed on the cover. I didn't open it yet. I wanted them to feel its weight before they saw what was inside. The candles hissed, their wax pooling onto the tablecloth. I slid the calendar open with careful fingers and the first page fell flat. Lines of neat handwriting, black ink steady, but across the dates red excess slashed like wounds. Gasps rippled around the table. My brother leaned forward, his voice a harsh whisper. What is this? I traced a finger over one of the red marks. That, I said, was the day I missed my first promotion interview. I was supposed to be downtown at 9. Instead, I was here at your house watching your kids because you said the babysitter canceled last minute. That job would have changed my career. But you called and I came. His mouth opened, then closed again. I turned the page. Another month. More red X's. That week, I continued, was when I had tickets to Boston. A small trip, nothing fancy. My first vacation in years. But then the call came, your pipes burst and you couldn't afford the plumber. I spent the money on repairs instead. Do you know what I did that weekend? Sat here in this very dining room watching the water dry on your floor. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint buzz of the overhead light. I flipped another page. The year was 2011. This one, I said, tapping the ink, was when the man I loved asked me to move with him. I told him no. I told him my family needed me. He left. You all stayed. And here I am. My son shifted uncomfortably. His fork scraped the plate though he hadn't eaten a bite. Mom, that's not fair. Not fair. My voice rose, sharper than I meant, but I didn't pull it back. Do you think fairness ever sat at this table? I gave up more than you'll ever know. And every time I told myself it was worth it because family matters. But looking at you now, I shook my head. I wonder if I was wrong. I turned another page and the red marks thickened. Year after year, entire months painted over with slashes. The paper smelled faintly of ink and dust, the scent of years long gone. My niece whispered almost to herself, all those years. Yes, I said, my voice quiet again. Years I don't get back. Years I can't buy. Receipts can be repaid. Time cannot. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't let the tears come. Tears had no place here. My daughter-in-law finally spoke, her voice sharp. You didn't have to do all that. You chose it. I looked at her long, steady. I chose it because I believed in family. I chose it because every time you cried, every time you begged, I thought it mattered. I thought you would remember. But you only remember what I give, not what I lost. I slid the calendar closer to her, the pages fanning open like a wound. Go on. Pick a year. Any year. See what I gave up so you could sit here tonight with your full plates. Her hand stayed folded tight in her lap. The clock struck 7:30. The sound was long, dragging, as if marking the wasted hours of my life. I turned the pages myself, faster now. 2015 red marks across every week in April. That was when I was supposed to take night classes. I wanted to finish my degree. But your son wrecked his car, and I spent every evening driving him to work until he could save for another. I flipped to 2018. Red slashes in December. My retirement savings. Gone. Used to cover the down payment on this very house when the bank threatened to take it. My brother's face went gray. He pressed his lips together but said nothing. I turned to 2020. The page was nearly drowned in red. The year the world stopped, you all came knocking again. Bills. Rent. Groceries. I didn't breathe a word of what it cost me. I just kept giving. I paused, closed the book halfway. My voice softened, low and steady. Do you see it now? Every red mark is a life I might have lived. A trip I might have taken. A love I might have chosen. All gone. My son stared at the calendar, his jaw tight. Why keep it all? He asked finally. Because I needed to remember, I said. When the loneliness hit me. When the nights stretched too long. When I asked myself why I never left, never chose myself. I needed proof that I wasn't imagining it. Proof that I had given enough. I ran my palm over the cover, closing the book gently, almost tenderly. And now I think I've given more than enough. The room was thick with silence again. My niece dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. My daughter-in-law twisted her ring around her finger, staring down. My brother wouldn't meet my gaze at all. But I didn't stop. I placed the calendar squarely in the center of the receipts, the red marks and faded slips merging into one mountain of sacrifice. This is the true cost of family, I said. And tonight you are going to answer for it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The weight of paper and ink, the silence of missed years, it spoke louder than anything I could say. I sat back, folding my hands. My heart was steady, calm, almost frighteningly so. And then I asked the question that hung heavier than all the rest. What? I said, my eyes sweeping across them. Have any of you ever given back to me? The silence that followed was worse than shouting. My son's mouth opened, then shut. My niece shook her head. My daughter-in-law blinked hard but said nothing. My brother stared at the table, his knuckles white against his fork. None of them had an answer. And that, I thought, was answer enough. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch until it grew unbearable. My hands rested on the table, still as stone. Their eyes flicked between one another, searching for someone brave enough to break it. No one did. Finally, my brother shifted, clearing his throat. Look, he muttered, voice low and uneven, we've all leaned on you. Maybe more than we should have. But you can't hold this over our heads forever. Family. I cut him off with a glance. Final. He fell silent, the rest of his sentence dying in his throat. I spoke softly, but the words landed sharp. Family doesn't mean emptying one life to fill another. Family doesn't mean draining me dry because you couldn't stand on your own 2 feet. My daughter-in-law fidgeted, her hand twisting her wedding ring around and around. But you're stronger than us, she whispered. You always have been. You could handle it. The words sank in deep. Stronger. As if strength meant being used until nothing was left. I handled it, I said, my voice steady, because you gave me no choice. The clock in the hall struck 8. The sound echoed through the room, heavy as a gavel. I felt the shift inside me then. Something closing. Something done. My son finally spoke. His voice was low, almost pleading. Mom, no one's saying you didn't give a lot. We know you did. But leaving now, taking that job, moving away, what happens to us? There was the truth they'd been circling all night. Not love. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing what I gave them. What happens to you? I repeated, my eyebrows lifting. That's what you're worried about? Not what happens to me. He lowered his gaze. I stood then. Fully. The chair legs scraped against the wood floor, sharp as a blade being drawn. My knees ached from the motion, but I stood tall, straighter than I had in years. The room felt colder the moment I rose. I placed my palms flat on the table, leaning just enough to let my voice slice through the air. What happens to you, I said, is none of my concern anymore. My niece gasped. My brother's head snapped up. My daughter-in-law whispered something under her breath, too soft to catch. I straightened, smoothing my blouse, and looked each of them in the eye. Come. Finished. I am done, I said. The words were quiet, but they cracked through the air like ice breaking on a lake. My brother slammed his fist against the table. You can't just walk away, he barked. His voice shook, though betraying the fear beneath the anger. I turned toward him slowly. Watch me. His face flushed red, his mouth opening to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I have carried you long enough. All of you. Through your debts. Through your failures. Through every mistake you piled onto my shoulders. I paused, my voice lowering, steadier than steel. I won't carry you another day. The words sank in. My daughter-in-law's lip trembled. My niece's eyes welled with tears. My son's face tightened, jaw clenched hard enough to ache. They weren't mourning me. They were mourning the loss of their safety net. The realization didn't wound me. It freed me. Mom, wait, my son said quickly, his hand reaching across the table. Just think about this. We need you here. You're the one who holds us together. I looked at his hand. Calloused, strong, but trembling slightly. I thought of all the nights I stayed up waiting for his calls, all the mornings I bailed him out, all the years I put his needs before my own. Slowly I drew my hands back, folding them against my chest. If I'm the glue holding this family together, I said softly, then maybe it's time to let it fall apart. His face went pale. I turned toward the stack of papers and the calendar, lying open like a graveyard in the center of the table. I rested my fingers lightly on the cover, then pushed it toward them. Keep it, I said. Keep all of it. Consider it my parting gift. A record of everything you took so you never forget. My daughter-in-law whispered, but where will you go? The corners of my lips curved faintly, not into a smile but into something colder. Anywhere but here. My brother scoffed, shaking his head. You won't last a month without us. That was the moment I laughed. Quiet, low but real. Without you, I said. I've lasted decades carrying you. Imagine how far I'll go once I put you down. The laughter unsettled them more than shouting ever could. The air in the dining room shifted again, heavier now, like the last seconds before a storm breaks. My niece dabbed her eyes, whispering to herself. My son sat frozen, torn between anger and fear. My brother looked ready to explode but couldn't find the words. I let it all settle. Let the weight of my decision fill every corner of the room. Then I pushed my chair back into place. Fully. Quietly. No slamming. No theatrics. Because the breaking point wasn't loud. It was cold. It was the stillness in my bones, the steadiness of my breath, the certainty in my voice when I said, I am leaving. And there is nothing you can do to stop me. The candle flames flickered, shadows stretching long across the table, bending over the mountain of receipts and the blood-red calendar. No one moved. No one dared. I turned toward the door. My hand rested on the back of the chair for a moment, grounding me, steadying me. I didn't look back. Not yet. Behind me, my brother whispered almost to himself, what are we supposed to do without her? The question hung heavy, unanswered. And I let it. Because for the first time in my life, their survival wasn't my responsibility. I let that truth settle in my chest like steel, steady and cold. My hand left the chair back and I turned toward the hallway. My footsteps echoed against the hardwood, slow and deliberate. Behind me, the dining room sat frozen as if the very walls held their breath. Wait, my son said suddenly. His voice cracked, boyish again, not the voice of the grown man across the table. Mom, please. Don't do this. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. My reflection in the glass cabinet caught the flicker of the candlelight. My shoulders looked broader than I remembered. Stronger. I already did it, I said softly. The silence that followed was sharper than any scream. I walked into the hallway, the scent of furniture polish and dust greeting me, familiar as a second skin. The photos on the wall watched me as I passed. Birthdays, graduations, weddings. Moments I had paid for, faces smiling because I had sacrificed behind the camera. I brushed my hand lightly over one frame, then let it fall away. "Where will you go?" my daughter-in-law called after me, her voice trembling. I paused at the doorway, my hand resting on the frame. "Where I should have gone years ago," I answered. The truth was, I didn't know the exact address yet. But it didn't matter. Anywhere beyond those walls was freedom. I reached for the doorknob. The cool brass was solid in my hand, grounding me. I twisted it slowly and the hinges groaned. The front door opened just wide enough for the night air to slip in, crisp, cool, smelling faintly of rain. Behind me, chairs scraped. My brother's voice rose, desperate now. "You can't just leave us with nothing." I turned then, just enough to face them, framed by the open door and the shadows beyond it. My brother's face was flushed, his fists clenched against the table. My niece's cheeks were streaked with tears. My son looked pale, hollow, his hand gripping his hair. "You'll survive," I said. My tone was calm, almost gentle. "The same way I did every time you left me to pick up the pieces." Their silence was answer enough. I stepped outside. The air wrapped around me, cool and freeing. My chest expanded with a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. The crickets sang in the yard, the night alive with sounds that no one at that table could control. For a moment, I simply stood there on the porch, feeling the wooden boards under my shoes, smelling the damp earth of the garden I had once tended. Behind me, the muffled voices rose, anger, pleading, panic, but they were already fading into background noise. I walked down the steps slowly, each one a goodbye. "Mom," my son called again, his voice breaking on the word. I turned once more, just enough for him to see my face in the porch light. "You'll learn," I said. "You'll all learn. My silence will teach you louder than my voice ever did." And then I stepped into the night. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I made my way down the path. The house loomed behind me, a shadow of everything I had carried for too long. I didn't look back again. I couldn't. Looking back was what had kept me there in the first place. Each step forward was a cut, not against me but against them. They had lived off my presence, my giving, my constant yes. My absence would be the sharpest blade. As I reached the gate, a thought came unbidden. All those years I had feared being alone, and now in the quiet of the night, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I was relieved. The truth hit me then. The revenge wasn't in the receipts or the red calendar or the final words at the table. The revenge was in the space I left behind. In the sudden emptiness of their plates when no one filled them. In the bills that would arrive without my check to cover them. In the silence of a phone that would never again answer their late-night pleas. I opened the gate, the hinge squealing like a cry that wasn't mine anymore. For the first time I felt the night belonged to me. I walked toward the street, the dim glow of a street lamp painting a path ahead. My breath came easier. My shoulders lighter. I was no longer dragging their weight with me. Behind me, the door to the house slammed open. My brother's voice rang out, sharp with panic. "You'll regret this." I stopped at the edge of the street. The words carried across the cool air, but they didn't touch me. Slowly, I turned my head, letting my gaze meet his one final time. "No," I said. "You will." His face twisted in the doorway, but I didn't wait for a reply. I stepped onto the pavement, the cool night stretching wide around me. Each stride forward was a cut deeper than any knife, a wound they would feel long after the candles burned out and the plates went cold. And with every step I felt myself becoming whole again. For decades I had been their crutch, their wallet, their lifeline. Tonight I became something else. Untouchable. The night air carried me forward, steady and calm. My heart no longer pounded with anger or grief. Only clarity. I didn't need to slam doors, raise my voice, or make threats. My silence, my leaving was enough. It was the blade they never saw coming. And I walked into the darkness, free at last. If this story struck a chord with you, subscribe now. More dark, emotional stories of betrayal and revenge are coming, and you won't want to miss the next one.